Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra. Rumors and emotional breakout. When people think of Judy Garland, they often picture the young Kansas farm girl from The Wizard of Oz. But after that role launched her to unimaginable heights, life off camera wasn't always so magical. By her late 20s, Judy had endured relentless studio demands, precarious finances, and multiple struggles behind the scenes. Enter Frank Sinatra, another show business powerhouse. Though no one can confirm precisely when their rumored affair began, whispers suggest two main periods, around 1949 and 1954. Both timelines share a key theme. Judy and Frank were emotionally vulnerable. Judy's marriage to Vincente Minnelli was teetering, and Sinatra's union with Nancy Barbato was deeply strained by his skyrocketing success. Over late-night studio sessions and industry parties, these two legendary voices may have found a brief escape in each other's company. Speculation flared again in 1954. Judy, fresh from her triumphant comeback in A Star is Born, clung to newfound stability, though she was still navigating intense personal battles. Sinatra, newly divorced and entangled with Ava Gardner, seemed equally adrift. It's said he offered Judy a shoulder to lean on during a crucial turning point. Their supporters insist it never went beyond a close friendship, but those who were there recall a certain emotional intimacy. Some claim they'd sneak away from filming schedules for quiet dinners or strolls in the Hollywood Hills, away from paparazzi lenses. While neither star openly admitted these encounters, the rumor mill never truly settled. Whether fact or fiction, the possibility that Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra found solace in one another only adds to their mystique. Sometimes these hush-hush connections flared up only to fizzle in the face of demanding careers and personal chaos. Marilyn Monroe and Marlon Brando are another duo rumored to have shared a fleeting spark. Proof that, at times, star power alone couldn't sustain a relationship under the harsh glare of the spotlight. James Dean and Ursula Andress. A moment before tragedy, James Dean's legacy as an icon of youth rebellion endures in part because he left so many questions behind. His career was lightning bright yet heartbreakingly brief. In 1955, just before his sudden passing, Dean is said to have had a blossoming connection with Ursula Andress. She was on the cusp of her own star-making role as the legendary Bond girl in Dr. No, though no one knew it yet. Dean's restlessness echoed Marilyn Monroe's and Marlon Brando's, but multiplied by his fierce, almost existential angst. Andress, by contrast, was known among insiders as quiet, but irresistibly intriguing. Friends mentioned seeing them share dinners at small Hollywood restaurants or speeding off on Dean's motorcycle for a day in the hills, escaping the watchful eyes of the press. Even then, the swirl of speculation around him was intense. Some tabloids tried to link Dean to multiple Hollywood starlets, yet he and Andress seemed determined to keep their closeness off the record. Part of that desire for secrecy might have been the caution that came with a brand new romance, one that neither was sure would last in the face of bustling careers. Tragically, we never got to see what might have been. Dean's untimely car crash in late 1955 cut his story short. For Andress, his memory remained a tender chapter, an unspoken bond that ended just as it was beginning. Indeed, this hush-hush connection is a reminder that even near-legendary figures can only guess at how life might twist next. While Dean's love story concluded far too soon, other stars like Clark Gable had romances that simmered just beneath the surface for years. One of them, with Joan Crawford, stands out for its electric rumor mill and hush-hush arrangements. Clark Gable and Joan Crawford, sparks behind the spotlight. Clark Gable, often dubbed the King of Hollywood, oozed swagger and sex appeal. Joan Crawford was the fierce, formidable queen of the silver screen. Together, they became a force even the studios couldn't fully control, though they certainly tried. Their reported affair took place in the early 1930s, during a time when both were under strict contracts with MGM. Audiences adored them and possessed in Dancing Lady, but rumor had it the real heat wasn't just on set. MGM executives were petrified that their top stars would court scandal that could jeopardize box office gold. According to Hollywood lore, the studio arranged carefully choreographed public appearances to squash rumors, simultaneously dispatching staffers to stand guard whenever Gable and Crawford were filming or traveling. Meanwhile, both faced personal entanglements at home. Gable was married, Crawford was as well. Yet the pull between them proved too strong to ignore, if the stories are true. Their admiration for each other's talent and grit only deepened that magnetism. Some claim Crawford once said, "He was the kind of man every woman wanted and could never quite keep." Despite never confirming any private involvement, the friction between them was undeniable. And in a town built on illusions, if enough people talk, there's often at least a kernel of truth. The deeper you dig, the more you uncover little glimpses, casual remarks from film crew members, or diaries from personal assistants that suggest the Gable-Crawford dynamic was very real. From Gable's charismatic flirtation to Crawford's unwavering ambition, this rumored affair epitomizes the risks stars took for a taste of personal happiness. And speaking of fleeting but powerful connections, Gary Cooper and Clara Bow also discovered that the line between film fantasy and real-life passion could become very, very thin. Marilyn Monroe and Marlon Brando, a heat that faded fast. Marilyn Monroe, poised to become the ultimate sex symbol, and Marlon Brando, the brooding method actor who revolutionized film performance, crossed paths when they were both on unstoppable ascents. The attraction between them was said to be obvious. When two forces of nature collide, particularly with that level of public intrigue, rumors are inevitable. Off-camera, Marilyn wrestled with intense anxiety and a deep-seated yearning for validation. Meanwhile, Brando wrestled with his own restlessness and complicated personal life. Their alliance became a haven, if only for a few charged encounters. In his later years, Brando hinted that while they shared a genuine connection, neither was in a place to commit long-term. They were like two comets blazing briefly in the same sky before each soared away on separate orbits. Paparazzi of the era latched onto the slightest glimmer, snapping photos whenever they appeared at the same social gatherings. Yet there was never that official statement or debut as a couple. Most fans were too focused on Marilyn's rumored links to baseball stars or political figures, and Brando's own whirlwind romances to pay close attention. Their story proves that sometimes Hollywood's largest luminaries prefer private closures rather than public declarations. And though their bond was overshadowed by the bigger drama swirling around them, it remains one of those quiet footnotes that hints at the hidden vulnerabilities behind the most famous faces in cinema. But Marilyn and Brando weren't the only shooting stars whose fleeting love rarely graced magazine covers. James Dean, that timeless symbol of rebellion, also shared a short-lived bond with an up-and-coming actress, Ursula Andress, right before his life ended in tragedy. Gary Cooper and Clara Bow, the brief, blazing fling. Before talkies revolutionized cinema, Clara Bow, the original It Girl, captured hearts with her vivacious spirit, big expressive eyes, and magnetic screen presence. Gary Cooper, tall and quietly charming, was on his way to becoming one of Hollywood's most dependable leading men. Their paths intersected on the set of Wings in 1927, a high-stakes war drama that would later score the very first Academy Award for Best Picture. Hollywood rumor mills claim that the chemistry we see on screen wasn't entirely scripted. Cooper was enthralled by Bow's spontaneity. She was equally captivated by his rugged sweetness. Their fling reportedly lasted only a short time, but the flames burned hot enough to keep tongues wagging around town. Some believe the romance ended because of the demands of filming and Bow's unstoppable rise. Others point to Cooper's own evolving personal life. Regardless, they remained professional and never aired any grievances in public. In those early days of Tinseltown, stars were taught to keep their private lives hidden behind the next swirling curtain call. To this day, film historians still debate how deep that fling really ran. But one thing's for sure, when you watch Wings and see their on-screen dynamic, it's nearly impossible not to sense a spark. It's one more example of how powerful that on-set magnetism could be, and how quickly it could disappear once the camera stopped rolling. Short-lived or not, these romances left indelible marks on Hollywood's legend. Then again, not all hush-hush stories remained ephemeral. Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, for instance, transformed a whirlwind courtship into one of the era's most high-profile marriages, albeit one eventually fraught with its own pressures. Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, a fairy tale facade. When Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh began dating in 1950, Hollywood tabloids feasted on every snapshot of the handsome duo. He was the dark-haired heartthrob beloved by fans for his youthful charisma, and she was the poised, radiant star fresh off hits like Little Women. They appeared to be the perfect couple, blending high glamour with a genuine fondness that most onlookers assumed was destined to last. Yet behind the scenes, tensions simmered. Studios worried that Curtis getting hitched might dampen his eligible bachelor appeal. Meanwhile, Leigh's blossoming career at MGM brought its own set of pressures. Leading ladies were often packaged as timeless beauties, unattached to avoid alienating male fans. But love prevailed, and they married in 1951 in a private ceremony. For a while, they truly seemed to have it all. They appeared in public together, starred in some projects side by side, and welcomed 2 daughters, one of whom, Jamie Lee Curtis, became an acting legend in her own right. But as Tony Curtis's workload intensified and Leigh took on more roles, cracks started forming. The illusions of stardom often brought overwhelming schedules, constant publicity shoots, and almost no room for real downtime as a family. By the early 1960s, the magic had worn thin. Their divorce in 1962 stunned many fans who had idolized their picture-perfect union. Even so, they both continued to speak with respect about each other long after going their separate ways. It was a reminder that even the most seemingly effortless Tinseltown romances can fall apart under the weight of fame. Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh might have made headlines, but another May-December relationship ran quieter, stirring curiosity for years. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Wagner, whose relationship not only defied societal norms, but showcased how real affection can flourish despite judgmental eyes. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Wagner, a rebel May-December romance. When Barbara Stanwyck met Robert Wagner on the set of Titanic, the 1953 version, there was an instant connection. At the time, Stanwyck was already a seasoned star, commanding respect for her knockout performances in classics like Double Indemnity. Wagner, more than 20 years her junior, was an up-and-comer with a boyish grin and plenty of ambition. In an era when large age gaps, especially with an older woman, were harshly judged, their relationship became a quiet rebellion against Hollywood's unwritten rules. They managed to keep their romance relatively low profile, likely recognizing that the tabloids would have a field day if they were less discreet. Still, fellow actors observed their strong bond. Stanwyck's confidence and wit entranced Wagner, who later credited her for guiding him in navigating the cutthroat industry. In return, his youthful optimism seemed to energize Stanwyck, giving her a fresh perspective on a world she had long dominated. But their age difference and divergent career tracks eventually steered them apart. They never married, and after a few years, they amicably separated. Interestingly, they stayed good friends, often speaking warmly about each other in interviews. Wagner, for one, consistently praised Stanwyck's generosity, remarking on her genuine care for him both as a performer and a person. Their story remains a testament to how love, no matter how unconventional, can create lasting bonds that outlive fleeting romance. While age gap relationships were scandalous enough, some pairings were legendary simply because of the electric tension involved. Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland captured hearts on screen, but famously never acted on the undercurrent of emotion that seemed to bind them. A what-if that has haunted fans for decades. Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles. A brilliant, flawed union. When Rita Hayworth married Orson Welles in 1943, the world was abuzz. She was the sultry screen goddess everyone wanted to watch dance across the screen. He was the maverick genius behind Citizen Kane, already heralded as one of history's greatest film achievements. Their relationship started with all the hallmarks of a grand romance: late-night creative brainstorms, glamorous Hollywood galas, and a shared thirst for pushing artistic boundaries. But behind the scenes, cracks appeared early. Welles was unpredictable, driven by restless creativity that often kept him away from home. Hayworth yearned for stability and a semblance of normalcy, a near-impossible goal in the midst of her own stardom. They had a daughter, Rebecca, hoping that might bring them closer. But the demands of fame and their contrasting temperaments intervened. Hayworth would later admit she never truly felt secure or desired in the marriage. Welles's intense focus on his projects often left her feeling isolated. By 1947, they decided to part ways, a move that disappointed fans who had built them up as an ideal power couple. While the romance itself didn't last long, it remains one of the era's most intriguing partnerships, an intersection of visionary brilliance and classic Hollywood allure. Their story illustrates that even seeming creative soulmates might crumble when pulled by different personal needs. And yet, some couples radiated such chemistry that their heartbreak still resonates as a seismic tragedy. Clark Gable and Carole Lombard's union stands as one of Hollywood's greatest loves and greatest losses. Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland, the chemistry that never blossomed. Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland lit up cinema in hits like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood. Their on-screen dynamic was so convincing that audiences assumed their real lives mimicked the romantic swashbucklers they portrayed. Yet despite the swirling rumors, de Havilland insisted they remained just friends, albeit with strong mutual admiration. Flynn, notorious for his flamboyant lifestyle and endless list of flings, openly declared he was smitten with de Havilland's grace and quick wit. She, on the other hand, appreciated his captivating talent but stayed cautious, aware of his wild reputation and wary of tangling her personal and professional worlds. Moreover, timing complicated their closeness. Flynn was already married, and de Havilland valued her integrity too highly to become entangled in a public scandal. Over years of filming, they developed a bond that blended genuine fondness with an unspoken sense of longing. In private letters, Flynn hinted at deeper feelings, while de Havilland, in later interviews, admitted there was a real emotional resonance between them. Still, they both chose to keep it contained. It's easy to wonder how their story might have played out if they'd crossed paths in different circumstances. Perhaps it would have been just as dramatic and short-lived as some other celebrity affairs, or maybe they would have kindled a love that overshadowed even their screen roles. Whatever the case, their example encapsulates the complicated dance of affection, reputation, and self-preservation that dominated classic Hollywood. Although Flynn and de Havilland never fully pursued their spark, some couples dove in wholeheartedly, merging their personal and creative worlds with passionate intensity. Take Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles, whose legendary talents and differences created a love that burned brightly before fizzling out. Clark Gable and Carole Lombard, a love cut short. By the time Clark Gable and Carole Lombard reconnected in 1936, both were already well established. Lombard's comedic genius contrasted beautifully with Gable's rugged aura, forming a partnership that felt as natural as it was enchanting. Though their initial on-set meeting in 1932, For No Man of Her Own, didn't ignite immediate sparks, fate brought them together at a party years later, and from that point on, they seemed inseparable. In 1939, as Gable balanced an intense filming schedule for Gone with the Wind, he and Lombard quietly eloped in Kingman, Arizona. Their marriage was a blend of farm life on their shared ranch in Encino and the glitz of Tinseltown events. Friends spoke of Carole's vivacious, prank-loving spirit and Gable's deeply protective affection for her. Even the press, usually cynical, admitted there was something pure in the way they complemented each other's quirks. Tragically, Carole Lombard's life ended in a plane crash in 1942 while she was returning from a war bond tour. Gable, utterly devastated, enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces shortly after, hoping to honor her patriotic dedication and perhaps find a way to cope with the grief. Those who knew him best said he was never the same again. Their story, heartbreak and all, remains a reminder that no measure of stardom can shield someone from life's cruel twists. Old Hollywood might look like a fantasy realm, but it was full of real people risking their hearts. A similar dynamic threads through so many couples from that era, each forging a piece of the collective tapestry we now call classic cinema. The era's most iconic couples, from Fairbanks and Pickford to Bogart and Bacall. Of course, when we speak of legendary Hollywood romances, we can't skip Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, two silent-era superstars who captured global adoration. Their 1920 marriage caused near riots in Europe as fans scrambled for a glimpse of the happy couple. Yet even their fairy tale union eventually buckled under relentless public scrutiny, overwhelming promotional tours, and the shifting tastes of cinema. Similarly, Greta Garbo and John Gilbert had the sort of passionate bond that fueled multiple silent film collaborations. But Garbo's reluctance to wed, combined with Gilbert's own tempestuous relationships, kept them from tying the knot. Their dynamic left fans wondering what might have been if their personal lives had matched the fervor in front of the camera. In another corner of the old movie world, Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier scandalized fans with their steamy affair when both were still married to others. Leigh's battles with manic depression ultimately strained their two-decade partnership, though their synergy on stage and screen enchanted audiences everywhere. Then there's Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, whose 25-year age gap raised eyebrows. Despite that skepticism, they formed one of Hollywood's most inspiring marriages, right until Bogart's passing in 1957. Their on-screen magic in films like To Have and Have Not mirrored the warmth and devotion they shared in everyday life. And who could forget Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy? Their near three-decade relationship was kept discreet due to Tracy's marriage and personal struggles. Yet Hepburn cherished him until his final moments, describing their years together as absolute bliss, heartbreakingly private though they were. Topping off the rare success stories is Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, who beat the odds with a 50-year marriage that withstood the test of time. Newman famously quipped, "I have a steak at home. Why should I go out for a hamburger?" capturing the loyalty and humor that made their union so enduring.